Yo, what is up everyone? Back here with another video. Today we're going to be going over what is, in my opinion, the, no, not that. Where is it? BDSP team building? Yeah, there you go. Although it's not a BDSP team building guide, more so BDSP best teams. I just use the same folder category for everything pretty much. So, basically, in this video, I wanted to talk about the teams that are doing the best in BDSP VGC. Actually, let me turn up my mic a little bit because I know people say my audio is kind of low during like videos and stuff. So I'm going to turn it up a little bit. But yeah, so pretty much when it comes to BDSP VGC, right now we have kind of a bit more of an established metagame. So I wanted to take you guys through the best teams currently in the format and kind of what they are, so you guys would have a better understanding of what you can use for the format pretty much. So I'm going to be highlighting probably 3 of the best teams in my opinion, potentially 4 depending on kind of as we're looking through kind of talking about things. But I'm going to do a couple of different things. I'm going to show you the usage of the exhibition match between Japan and Germany. I'm going to show you the top cut of Victory Road, and we're still going to look at the top 21 of Victory Road, and we're also going to look at usage, because that'll help contextualize pretty much everything on the team, so that you guys can kind of get a good understanding of that. So first, let's start with let me move it in the order I want to cover it. Okay. First, we'll start with the exhibition. Rotom-Heat was actually over this team. I talked about this last video, but we're looking at it from a different lens. So if you look at the teams, one of the most popular compositions actually was Tyranitar, Arcanine, Rotom-Heat, Cresselia, right? And as we continue to kind of go down, you'll see that we also have the core of Arcanine, Tyranitar, Gastro, Scizor, which is also another really popular combination. So basically, those 2 cores are the main standouts here. Marcus obviously used a team that he also used for Victory Road and is kind of a standout. Pretty much it screens Raikou with Rain. And then also you have Hitmontop and Snorlax, Stockpile Snorlax, so it's a pretty bulky team. I will be covering Rain as one of the best teams in the format, but it probably will not be Marcus's version just because I think that there might be more optimal versions of Rain, but we'll talk about that anyways. But yeah, so you'll notice anyways the main takeaways are that Rain is really good, right? Specifically Rain and Scizor is a common pair, usually an electric type as well, because you'll see Raikou is on this team as well. And Arcanine, Gastro, Tyranitar, and Scizor are also really good core. And then obviously there's Togekiss, Cress, Tyranitar, Fire type, or like Intimidate basically. So that's the main takeaway from this match. So I want to take 2 cores from there and kind of highlight those because these are kind of teams that I would see being very common or doing very well, right? And obviously these teams would be good for Battle Tower as well. That's why I always put in the title because usually VGC is a double battle format, right? And consistency is very important on VGC teams, and arguably VGC has a bit more of there's a lot more like challenge in it in a way because you're fighting versus not an AI that you can kind of take advantage of sometimes. So the team is still applicable for Battle Tower because like I guess it depends because sometimes the AI making different plays can be a little weird. But if you have consistent strategies that work in VGC, it's likely to work well in Battle Tower too. So that's why I always highlight that Battle Tower is kind of related to this because it's kind of similar, right? With VGC kind of being that, I'd say more challenging level of what Battle Tower is supposed to be in a way because you're kind of double battling other people, and if they're really good, obviously it's more difficult. But yeah, so a couple cores I want to highlight. I'm gonna call this core 1. We have Arcanine, Gastro, Tyranitar, and Scizor, right? So this core is pretty much just centered around having a setup option with the Scizor and having a setup option with the Tyranitar, Arcanine being able to Intimidate, and Gastrodon being able to use Storm Drain to pull away from these 2. Also, Gastrodon is a pretty good swap into what Scizor is weak to, Fire Coverage. And then pretty much usually these teams are rounded up in a couple of different ways. If we take a look at the usage for the Gastrodon teams on this kind of use, you'll see that this one decided to kind of forego Tyranitar, but use Raikou Latios. Now, Raikou Latios is a common partner with these 2 because pretty much you're able to use screens and you're also able to have offensive pressure with Latios. If you look at James is the one who had a main variation on this core. That being a different fire type and then Hitmontop. I think James' team honestly was really strong, and we're going to be covering that individually. And you'll see Victor or Torviv was pretty much using the most standard version. Latios was the most common thing that got swapped out from what I can see. But the normal team or the original team of this is pretty much Raikou, Latios, Scizor, Tyranitar, Arcanine, and Gastrodon, right? And the main reason why you're using this is because you pretty much have access to screens, right? So you have access to Light Screen, Reflect, Snarl, or Volt Switch, whichever you prefer, with Light Clay. And I'm just going to give out the general kind of sets or ideas. And then you can either run Life Orb or Specs. It's kind of mixed depending on what people want. Pretty much these two are guaranteed. You either see a difference between Tailwind or Psychic. Psychic is arguably a little more consistent because it gives you one extra form of coverage. Scizor typically goes between Metal Coat, or it goes between Akaberry or Lumberry. It completely depends on the team. Usually Lumberry is a staple on Rain teams because Rain already has the Rain to kind of block from the fire moves. So we'll go with Metal Coat in this instance because that was the one that actually won the whole tournament. But Akaberry is also a legit option, and then you also have like those other items. But yeah, so pretty much this Scizor can do a lot of damage because of Metal Coat. Bullet Punch is doing a lot of damage as well. Tyranitar typically runs Lumberry on the team, so Tyranitar is typically using Dragon Dance, it's setting up, and it's taking advantage of the Lum so can't get burned, which would obviously ruin its boost, right? It doesn't want to lose its boost. So pretty much it does that. And if you guys are interested in a video focusing on T-Tar and its usage specifically in the format, that's actually our previous video, as you can see through the background here. So make sure to check that out if you haven't already. But pretty much utilizing its stab moves, having Dragon Dance as a form of setup is really useful. Then you'll see Arcanine. Arcanine typically using the Mago Berry or one of the two. You can either run it special or physical, but pretty much it's used for Will-O-Wisp or Safeguard, whichever you prefer on your team. Will-O-Wisp is good for burning other physical attackers, and Safeguard is better for protecting your own physical attackers. And then finally for Gastrodon, Gastrodon's usually running Bulky Citrus Berry with Ice Beam, Earth Power, Recover, and Yawn. And pretty much the main reason why I want to highlight this core is because this is the core that a lot of the teams now are based on. As you can see, like there's a lot of this core, and a lot of them have Raikou on it. Pretty much that's because this is the team that got #1 on the ladder. So a lot of people are utilizing like similar versions of this. So it's pretty strong overall. Having the ability to set screens and kind of slow stuff down is really nice. So it's definitely something to keep an eye out for and to be aware of when you're playing. But yeah, so this is the first kind of team that I think is strong in the format and something that I think is worth it. Now, we're going to go into the second version of the team, or teams I think is really good. And we're going to cover Rain, right? So I'm going to call this Rain, and I'm going to call this Screens. Just because this is a little more accurate, right? So next one to cover is Rain. So Rain pretty much is... It's interesting, right? Because typically you'll see that right now, Rain is biased more towards Politoed and Ludicolo. A lot of people expected Pelipper to be better. I even expected Pelipper to be better by some margin, but it seems like Politoed's a little more popular. Or at least not better, but used more. So we're going to see Politoed actually the popular partner. Although Flavio did have Pelipper, and it did do better than Politoed did on Marcus's team. So the argument's still there, right? But I think there was a lot more Politoed Ludi. But I'll be covering both versions anyways, so we can go over it. Ludicolo is undisputed the best partner for Rain right now because it pretty much has that wide coverage that every Rain team needs. The most common set that I've seen on these teams are like Scald, Ice Beam, Giga Drain, Protect. Sometimes there's Energy Ball instead, or sometimes there's, I don't think, does it get Leaf Storm this gen? It does not get Leaf Storm, right? Yeah, it does not get Leaf Storm this gen. So it's either like Giga Drain or it's Energy Ball. Giga Drain's probably a little bit better because you at least get some recovery. So then yeah, and then Politoed's on the team. So pretty much on every Rain team, your staple pair or like whatever you're going to have is always going to be the Politoed with, usually you want Parasong, right? It's like Parasong Encore. And then you have Ludicolo, obviously with its setup or whatever. And then you have Scizor. And the reason why you want Scizor specifically on this team is because the Rain covers Scizor's fire weakness, the 4x fire weakness. So basically gives it a lot more utility. So pretty much either on these teams, you're going to want either Lumberry or you're going to want Metal Coat. You never want to go for Akaberry on these teams because you already have Rain, right? So why not capitalize and actually use something useful? If I were to give you a personal recommendation of what I would probably utilize, I'd probably be using Metal Coat, although I have seen Lumberry and it does make sense because you're kind of not susceptible to burns, right? So it kind of works out, excuse me. But yeah. And now, if we look at the common rain teams that did well, first we'll take a look at Atoki's team. It had screens, and Marcus also had screens. So it's safe to say that screens are actually kind of really good on these rain teams, and something that should be utilized a lot. Pado's team was a little bit different, or Flavio Del Pidio, however you call him, but we just call him Pado. Pretty much, he used screens, and it was pretty strong. I don't know if it's actually screens or specs Raikou, actually. I kind of take that back because I'm not 100%. I didn't see his team. We can actually double check it because teams and results are right here. Where is it? Let's see. Okay, he used Expert Belt Ludicolo, Pelipper with that. That's fine. Okay, so you use specs. Yeah, I figured it might be specs. So pretty much you either want specs or screens Raikou. I think you can make a case for either, in my opinion. However, personally, I would probably go with the screens route, but that's also personal preference. You can also go with specs. But if you were to go with screens, you'd probably be going with something like Thunderbolt, Light Screen, Reflect, Snarl, right? And then we can even look at Marcus's team, which actually was using the screen stuff. I don't remember his exact set, but yeah. So he's using Snarl, Thunderbolt, Reflect, Light Screen, exactly. And he's using the Life Orb Ludi that we kind of discussed. So what I really liked about Marcus's team, and something that's worth considering for you guys, is you don't always need a fire type on your teams if your team is good enough. I think Hitmontop is actually a really nice option on these teams. Also, Arcanine is potentially a good option. You can go with either. Just recognize the difference is that probably with your Hitmontop, you're going to actually have fake out pressure, and it compensates for Ludicolo's lack of fake out pressure. Whereas if you don't have a Hitmontop, you probably want fake out on Ludicolo and maybe opting away from the Life Orb. So in this case, we're going to go with the Hitmontop, obviously having this set. Marcus ran Fist Plate on his Hitmontop, right? And Fist Plate's fine. It's pretty much to boost the fighting coverage move because you're able to do a bunch of damage. Typically, these Hitmontop will just run these moves. Marcus was running Mach Punch because it gives you an extra priority move, and you kind of have the Fist Plate. So I actually think it makes a lot of sense on teams like these because you're able to get extra fighting damage. You're able to get Mach Punch damage, and you're able to go for stuff like Wide Guard, right? And still get that support out of the Hitmontop. So that kind of contextualizes the choice. And the main reason why I think Marcus had it on his Hitmontop is because he wanted more damage, but also because the Citrus Berry was taken by the Politoed. That can obviously change a lot, right? Now, it's worth noting, he also had Ice Beam as Politoed. You can actually run Ice Beam over... Parasong, right? I think you could even justify running it over Encore, because it pretty much gives you an extra form of coverage to hit opposing Mons, and you can kind of utilize this stuff. By the way, credit for all these teams go to everyone listed here, the ones I'm looking at. So if you guys see the names here, specifically for Marcus, this is pretty much all their usernames on like Twitter or whatever, and you'll be able to find them on Twitter under these names for the most part. But yeah, I just wanna make that clear that I'm not taking credit for like their teams. This is all them. I'm just kind of explaining it to you guys, but you'll see that like kind of this is like a standard rain team in terms of like how it's used. The Snorlax slot was a little bit unique from Marcus's end. I think that you can justify using other slots as well. Maybe something a little more aggressive like Latios, right? Or you could even go with something a little bit more offensive like a fire type maybe to have something extra to break stuff. With rain teams it's always weird because sometimes you want fire types, but also too it's like kind of because you're kind of, negating it with like the Politoed or whatever. So yeah, it's just important to note. And then obviously if you look at maybe some like other mons that can capitalize on it, maybe some flying mons that would appreciate the Hurricane if they can use it. I actually need to double check on that because I don't know if there's too much that gets Hurricane. Let me check. Let's see. Moltres is something I thought was really interesting, by the way, on rain teams because Moltres actually gives you a fire type that you can utilize next to Hitmontop, and you can click Wide Guard next to. I don't think it gets Nasty Plot. No, it doesn't. But you can pretty much utilize it with Flamethrower, right? And that kind of gives you coverage for opposing Scizor, and it's actually kind of a wall for Scizor. and you can use Air Slash or Hurricane on it, and that pairs really well with your Rain mode almost. I don't know if it gets Tailwind this gen. It does not get Tailwind this gen, but basically you can use like Hurricane Flamethrower next to it. Gives you a nice option there. You can even use Roost and Protect, or like even Will-O-Wisp if you want. And the nice thing is it's really good next to Rain because you're able to pretty much you're basically able to not care about the rain because you're able to spam stab Hurricane, but also to you have that fire coverage to deal with stuff like opposing Scissor that might be annoying or something, right? Marcus obviously opted for the Snorlax, but yeah, that's also a valid option as well. So this is kind of covering that standard rain team that I think could be good. Obviously, Moltres hasn't used it yet. That's just like my personal idea on it. But yeah. And then we can go into the last kind of team archetype I wanted to touch on. And that's something that both I used and another player, Kakunaka, used. Pretty much it's Disquake plus Telepathy Gardevoir. And you'll see that we had very similar teams in some regard, besides like some of the support mons. So the key idea of these teams specifically is Earthquake next to Gardevoir and what's it called, Zapdos, plus Scarf Gardevoir with Gleam and like Moonblast, and then you have Discharge, so you can discharge next to Gardevoir and Mamoswine. What this results in is a really offensive core that can capitalize on basically spread moves without the threat of it actually damaging yourself, right? And pretty much these archetypes are really good because it can exert a lot of pressure and kind of force your opponents to respond pretty much with suboptimal ways, or like always have to take damage on entry. These teams actually happen to be really weak to James' team, which obviously no one else was using James' team, so it wasn't really noticeable until I got to playing him. But I think out of both teams, my team was a little bit weaker to James, and I had pulled him in cut, like in top 4, because he had the Rotom-Heat plus Gastrodon, which made this core really difficult to break him, because all I had was Tyranitar, and he has a Scizor, and he has a Hitmontop, right? So it kind of results in me having to really prioritize removing one of those and then being able to remove stuff. These teams typically deal with opposing Gastrodon by running Energy Ball in the Gardevoir. I'm not sure if he had Energy Ball in Guard. He did not. But usually you want Energy Ball in Gardevoir because it's going to allow you to actually break through the opposing Gastrodons. I ran Energy Ball to have an easier time with that. But yeah, pretty much Energy Ball gives you that option to break through. I'm not sure if was his Zapdos Specs? Yes, he was Spec Zapdos with Hyper Beam. Yeah, so we were running the same Zapdos set. The only difference was he was using Pachirisu on his team. I think the reasoning for Pachirisu on the team was because he wanted redirection. And what you can do next to Pachirisu is you can go for a Discharge next to Pachirisu, and it heals the Pachi. You can go for, obviously, Scarf, and Pachirisu redirects Scizor when it's a Gardevoir lead. And then you obviously have Pachirisu with Volt Absorb, which redirects the moves from the Gyarados and just absorbs it. So it gives a lot of options there, right? So pretty much, hopefully that contextualizes it for you guys. So pretty much, yeah, main idea is spread moves, spam. You're pretty much able to go for a bunch of damage with that. And then you have partners that kind of compensate for whatever lack of coverage your team has, or the lack of like defense, whatever your team has, or defensive, no, it's not defensibility. What is it? Defensive potential or something like that that your team has, right? So like, you'll see like even like this build, right? Like sure, it does a lot of damage, but it doesn't really have much in terms of the defensive end of things, right? Like it's still going to be taking a bunch of damage. So pretty much the way you compensate for that is by going for pretty much having a bulkier core to kind of round it out. And this is done in a lot of different ways. Specifically for me, the way it was done is Heatran gave me a Steel type, and if you look at the all these mons here, Zapdos is weak to ice moves, Heatran resists that. Gardevoir is weak to steel moves, Heatran resists that. Mamoswine is weak to fire moves, Heatran also is immune to that. So you'll kind of see that like that's kind of where the thought process for Heatran came in mind. Now, obviously, this alone wouldn't be enough to make the team good. So I was like, okay, well, how do I make this a better team as a whole? And pretty much the way you round out these teams is by either having something to stop the spread moves and protect your mons, or having something to reduce their damage and kind of protect you from the things you're weak to. So in Kakunaka's case, he was using Pachirisu to protect his partners. In my case, I was using Hitmontop pretty much with Wide Guard, right? So that you could go for a way to almost protect your team, right? So you could pretty much click Wide Guard to protect yourself from your own spread moves, or just from opposing spread moves. and pretty much just rounded out the team to make it really good. And then obviously Tyranitar as a filler is help versus weather and it help versus other things, and that's how it was kind of utilized. And then, yeah, same thing with Kakunaka's team, kind of the same idea. So let me actually put this back here so you guys have like the full visual of it at the end. But yeah, I'll be doing a team report on this team specifically. If you guys are interested in getting early access to like the spreads, EVs, everything, that's already on Patreon, which you guys can check out down below. However, there will be a team report coming out on it probably within a week. I'll have to see when I can get it uploaded because I do want to make it like a good team report and kind of explain it to you guys. But that's the general idea behind the team, and you'll see that with Kakunaka's team as well. So I'm going to call this Disquake Telepathy Spam. But yeah, so these are the main good teams, I think, in the format right now that have kind of established themselves. I do think there's a lot of other teams that can be really good right now, but this is kind of the general idea of all of them, and hopefully this contextualized all the choices on the teams for you guys and kind of gave you guys a better idea of like how they're utilized and what they're for. But once again, guys, if you guys enjoy the content, as always, make sure to check out my other links and socials down below. Make sure to sign up for private coaching if you guys are interested in improving your VGC skills. And once again, guys, thank you for all the support, as always. And I will see you guys on the next video. Peace.